Hey, welcome to Diaries of Badass Bosses, the podcast series that takes a deep dive into the journeys of entrepreneurs and businesses who are shaking things up in their industry. I'm Penny.
And I'm Tigz. And in this series, we'll explore the stories of people who have defied the odds, taken risks, and forged their own paths to success. We'll hear from founders who have turned their ideas into thriving businesses, as well as CEOs who have transformed their organizations and taken them to new heights.
So exciting. We're going to talk about what it means to be a badass boss, including the challenges, the rewards, and the importance of resilience and adaptability. We're going to hear their stories, insights, advice for anyone looking to make their mark in the world of business, no matter what size.
Want a weekly dose of badass boss energy? Join us every Wednesday on all major podcasting platforms.
See you there. Well, welcome to the Diaries of Badass Bosses podcast. In this episode, I am delighted that we are joined by the wonderful Andrei Lussmann, the owner of a thriving hospitality business based in Hertfordshire. As a self-made entrepreneur, Andrei has built his business from the ground up, overcoming numerous obstacles along the way. With a passion for food and a desire to provide a unique dining experience, he has established himself as one of the most respected and innovative restaurateurs in the region. So welcome. Lovely to have you. Today, we're going to be delving into your background, your journey into the world of hospitality. And we're going to explore the history of the business, okay? So where you've come from its early days to its current success, and hear a little bit more about the challenges you kind of faced along the way as well. So let's kick off.
Good morning, and thank you.
So nice to meet you today. I've been in your restaurant a couple of times actually. It's an Albans one, so.
Well, that's a good start.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I've been in a few, so I think I've nearly covered all of them, but I've not quite done Berkhamsted, so we'll come on to that one.
We've been around for 20 years.
Yeah.
So you've had time.
I feel judged. In my defence, I've only been up this way a few years. So.
But don't worry. And if you hadn't eaten at Lussmanns, it's not a problem. Okay.
But what I can say is it's beautiful, so I'm absolutely a big fan. So first of all, can you just tell me a little bit about your background and how you even got started in hospitality?
Yes, I suppose I came from a family that was loosely connected to hospitality, and I'm from a generation which didn't take too much time to consider what one was going to do, and probably was driven more by what your parents said you ought not to do. And as a result of that, one of my parents made it clear to me at a very young age I wasn't the caliber to be a pilot or a dancer for fame. So when I asked what I ought to do, they said I should work in a hotel, and that was probably it, because it was the die was cast, the time was told. And the rest of my 30 years in the industry has been down to that moment. But you don't think about it; you just get on with it. And I suppose because I had some relationship with hospitality, with my family, it sort of made sense. So not very sexy, but just a very sort of pragmatic, and I think it was discussed and agreed, and over sort of darning a sock and a couple of minutes, and then that was it.
Yeah.
So when I came to the careers officer, who said, right, let's discuss what you want to do, it was like, well, there's no need to discuss, it's been decided.
I mean, in a way, my next question was like, what inspired you to get into the business? So I guess you kind of really covered that for us.
Yeah, and also you see films that inspire you and you love, and there is still this spirit amongst anyone who's made some money outside hospitality that I'd love to have my own bar or restaurant. And that does cultivate this desire and drive in people, quite often in people's later years, to open up their own business.
Yeah.
It's a tough business, and I hate to say it, it doesn't always go to plan. So I think, like with any industry, it's about starting at the very beginning, grafting for a long time, understanding what goes on behind the scenes. You'd never think about setting up, a chemist or a veterinary surgery had you not spent some years in studying that business or that craft.
Yeah.
So it's a very romantic industry. So I suppose I was attracted partly by the romance of it as a child. But the romance does wear off quite quickly when you realise, at least when I started the industry, it was a very tough business, and it was a 100-hour week. And that was the end of it, and there was no discussion.
I mean, it is, as an industry, it's actually known for, in the first 12 months, most businesses that start out in hospitality will fail. And that is, it's not a myth, is it?
No, it's more than 90%.
Yeah.
It might even be 99%. It's a horrible figure.
Yeah.
And it's not a good statistic. But it's like most things. If you start at the beginning and you understand the bionics, mechanics, the platforms that you need to understand and appreciate well, and show some sort of competence, then you've got a very good chance to at least work well within someone else's industry, or someone else's business, or better so have the drive to maybe look to improve on what you've learned and do it your own way.
Did you find your feet working in other people's hospitality businesses first? Like how did you get from saying I'm going into hospitality? How did you end up with your first restaurant?
Well, I mean, we all have part-time jobs. We all have jobs as kids, and I think my first job actually was a petrol attendant, which I think today, in terms of health and safety, I was 16 or 15. I can't remember. I was down in Devon, and I was running a two station. Well, I don't know what even they're called where you put petrol, but. It was 2 points where you would deliver people's petrol into their cars. So you had to do it yourself. And at the same time, they had a small cafe there that served burgers and chips. And the chap, or whoever was responsible, didn't turn up. And they sort of said, we'll show you how to use the fryer. And can you imagine the health and safety in terms of the fryer, there's a cafe, there's a petrol station, and you're 15 or 16. Would you mind? We'll show you.
Wow.
Of which I did.
Deep end,
and that
deep end.
And that was the beginning. Can you imagine? I mean, it's a great sort of scene for a film, isn't it? The whole thing blows up. And that was the beginning of, I suppose, my relationship, which, from there I then went to work for a hotel and worked as a kitchen porter for a number of months and years. And in fact, I think I was the best kitchen porter this chef had. It was one of these old kitchens with about 25 big, burly, in those days just male chefs with tall white hats, very aggressive. And when the HR manager said, I think we'd like to have you on the front of house because you're the sort of person that gets on with people. She spoke to the head chef, and he said, first of all, get out of the kitchen. We don't, this is not really your department to come in here. And secondly, don't ever try and take any of my staff out of the kitchen ever again. And then he said to me, you're my best person and I don't want you to go. And as a reward, he gave me his chef clogs. His shoes.
Wow.
Now, we were the same size feet, thankfully. But I mean, that was a very strange thing. So I ended up, in fact, the second year round, because I then went to college, but I then went back and thought, right, I've got to work this around. So I ended up working sort of 12, 14 hours, and then I'd do 4 hours. I did sort of the cigar and brandy shift, which was sort of sort of 12 o'clock at night until 3 a.m. For those which were staying in the hotel. And he wasn't aware of it until he became aware of it. I was like, well, I can't wash your dishes forever. I've got to develop. And I suppose I wasn't too interested in becoming a chef. I wanted to get out and be where it was glamorous and glitzy and full of beautiful people, because the kitchen was a very dirty, grimy, smelly, sweaty, horrible place. And I thought, I can't stay here forever.
Yeah.
So I suppose I had my chance to become a chef, and I decided at a very young age I should get out and enjoy.
And you're grateful for that.
Well, yes. I mean, I went back to cooking because I suddenly realised I didn't know how to cook. And I realised I had to be able to cook in terms of to run my own business. But I was grateful. So it all began there. And then I suppose I'll say to anybody, the quicker you can get some experience, and the more experience you can get across a multitude of places which are related, the better.
Yeah.
You can't beat those skills you build up in meeting people, in confronting, in conflict, in communication, in participating in problem solving, because I'm not saying that if I was the Prime Minister I'd make everybody go on national service into a restaurant, but the skills you learn in hospitality, where you are thrust into situations where you've got to get on with it, and today we do train and support younger staff
Yeah.
who need it,
Good.
which in those days we didn't. But it's a wonderful industry.
Yeah.
And it's a very positive industry when it works.
It was my first job. I set out, like, I think I was, again, 14. It was, unheard of. But I used to work in a restaurant and I did silver service at 14 years old. And I don't think I've ever met a happy chef, though. Does a happy chef exist?
Chefs have a wonderful way of presenting a very different facial expression to what goes on. And we've come a very long way. I mean, I remember working with chefs who would work 15, 16, 18 hours and they'd finish their shift and we'd all live in hotels, which is a terrible thing because it means you don't get away.
Yeah.
And we all need to get away, whether it's from family or work, we all need a moment just to have a walk or whatever. And in hotels, it was dreadful because you slept and lived on site. So therefore you socialised. So these chefs would be very miserable throughout 15, 18 hours on their feet. And they were big chaps, they weren't very fit. And the days of them, using saunas and spas and fitness centres, which is quite regular now, were unheard of. And you'd find them after you'd washed all the dishes, sort of 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. You'd see them in the bar, which would be the staff bar, and they'd have a pint, and there'd be a sort of 5 or 6 pint glasses empty next to them, and then they'd have a chaser next to the pint. And you just, and they'd be up in 4 hours, ready for the groundsman to be, cooking breakfast because this was a golf course as well. And you just think, God, they won't live long, and they always look miserable until they had the pints in their hand.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a very, in retrospect, you think that can't carry on, and that's why I'm sure they didn't live very long. No. And today, you do get happy chefs. I'm happy to say that we've got lots of chefs who we've trained who are happy. They have, and I don't think it's rocket science. I think if you have good time away, you get paid for overtime, and you work in an industry or a business that listens and actively improves the environment in which you work in, and then not most importantly, but as important, you can be proud that you're creating or making or producing something that's come from somewhere honourable with ethics and transparency about the sourcing, the provenance, and you have staff around you that make you a good coffee. That actually, and kitchens on the whole, which are open plan rather than in the dungeons, the cells of Soho, where the cockroaches and rats live. Then we do live in a better place where chefs are happier. But I definitely came into the industry at the end of a very severe period of malnutrition, both mental and physical.
And it's a testament to your business, I think. You've got 5 restaurants in Hertfordshire. So what would you say is the reason for that success, but what are the challenges that you face because of that?
Well, I think you've got to create something that is attractive, in which to get someone through the door. I think once you've got someone through the door, which that in itself is a job.
Yeah.
Pitch, position, town, demographic, the style of operation, how it looks from the front, the styling, the font, the fascia boarding, the way in which how it looks through the window, also how the staff are looking. I mean, it's amazing how many customers still look through a restaurant and make their decision based on that. And we don't always make a decision based on what we see on social media. And I think beyond all that, you've got to remember that, okay, you've got someone through the door, so how do we make this business, product, service, which is everything rolled into one, accessible, to the demographic that you're trying to attract, and how do you make sure that the staff are charming, how do you make sure the cost is right, and I suppose most importantly than everything, if you get all these things right, is saying, how do we remain consistent? So these are the sort of pillars or the mechanics of what goes on behind the scenes to determine that then you will have repeat business. And then from that repeat business, then you learn about things called cash flow, which I know. Clearly, I want to be a pilot, but one of the things you need to be good at being a pilot is understand maths and technology and IT. And I struggled with a calculator. So it was like, you can see I wasn't great. And I have had my moments, but I've learned the hard way. I mean, I set up Lussmanns to begin with in 2002, 20 years ago. I don't think I didn't know what the word cash flow was. I had no idea. Today I recognise that actually it's the most important word in the business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, however good you are at maintaining your consistency and standards and bringing customers in and rewarding customers with a service and a product which is better than your colleagues or contemporaries, if you don't know where the cash is, then it's all over. It's a bit like being at home, just understanding how much money you've got in your bank account and what you can spend on the groceries, etc. And so many business fail, and amazingly with restaurants, we get paid first. So actually, there's a real good reason that suggests a real good facet of the industry, which is if you get paid first, you should never have a cash problem. People who work in retail and have to buy their spring season well in advance of what they're going to sell and not quite sure what they're going to sell, and it's so much dependent on the weather, style, what's going on social media, celebrities, and all the rest of it. We in the hospitality industry quite often are quite lucky. We get the cash first, and we still have a 95 or 99% dropout rate within the first 12 months.
Yeah.
So, cash is really important. Well, not cash, but understanding cash flow has become something that I've, through difficult experiences of getting it all wrong, I've learned. And I think now I'm all right. So we'll see how the next 20 years go.
So on the subject of bringing people in, and you touched briefly on this a second ago about ways that you attract your clients. I know one of the things that has been really important to you along your journey is sustainability, and it's something that you pride yourself, and it's mentioned quite a lot in other interviews you've done and on the website. Can you tell us about why sustainability is so important to you and your brand?
Yes, I think restaurants or feeding people is quite an interesting dynamic. It's actually a very intimate transaction. There's not many things I can think of whereby it is so intimate in terms of a legal service out there, because you're giving customers something that they're having to eat, and therefore the relevance and the value of where that comes from actually is really important. When I grew up in the industry and I worked for other companies, I came to understand that the engine room, which I've touched on, behind the business, the consistency, your charming staff, the right costs, and being accessible, are as important today with us being sustainable as they were yesterday, because for all the sustainable virtues and ethics and ideals that we stand for, of which we're not very good at marketing in all fairness, but for all that we stand for and look to become leaders in, if you don't know how to run the business in the first place, then all of that is irrelevant. Better half the artisan in what you're doing than the dead artisan. And the funny thing is that we as a population and as a generation, we generally don't like to spend too much money when we go out to eat. And we definitely don't like to spend a lot on expensive, food that has been, organically reared or, has very good provenance, because essentially, it's expensive. And we think, well, we're just going out for a special occasion, and I buy good food at home, and you know what, it's a treat, so it's okay. And what you find is quite a lot of expensive restaurants who do it are expensive.
Yeah.
And they have a Burberry tag, or they're very Notting Hill about it, and it's you can't afford to eat there on a regular basis. And my thought was, why can't we create a restaurant group which is growing slowly, that actually says to customers, for £1 or £2 more than what you have on the high street, which is a group or a chain or a multiple, we'll give you something which is ethical.
Yeah.
And ethics, something that that sits within the umbrella of everything from how you manage your staff to how you review and oversee the logistics and the way in which you manage the administration of the business, everything from waste to supply, and then right through the provenance. So when we think about sustainability, we always think about where's your tomato come from, or is your beef organic, but actually I think that's a integral part.
Yeah,
it's the sexy part, really. Yeah. But in essence, there's so much more to it than that. So the idea was, could we create something which was just a local's favourite? Not reinvent the wheel, just make sure the wheel moves with less friction, and therefore do what the competitors do, but better. And then the icing on the cake would be, for those which were interested, the ethical personality of the business was there, but not to the point whereby if you ate in a restaurant, you'd have someone knocking on your table and saying, do you know where these tomatoes come from? And are you aware this beef is such and such? And do you appreciate that we recycle all our waste? And the lighting's LED and the staff. Because in the end, I don't think any of us care enough to have some something dictated to us. We want to go out with our loved ones or someone else's loved ones. Yeah. And in doing so, we don't want to hear about all that because we probably will know already.
Yeah.
And if we didn't know, maybe a couple of touches, but that's great. I'm here to see her or him or them. I'm certainly not here to hear all about your stuff. So we worked very hard to be quite quiet about it.
Understated.
Yes. And in fact, I've been told by everybody for 20 years, we're crap at marketing. So maybe
I do know someone who can do marketing.
We can always talk about that because and also, I suppose, I come from just about a world where it was always word of mouth.
Yeah.
Whereas today it's not always about word of mouth. There are groups out there, very good restaurant groups, that spend a lot of time and money and effort on marketing their business a good 3 to 6 months before they open.
Yeah.
And they're big names.
Yeah.
And when we open, we have historically never told anybody, apart from the fact that the doors are now open, come and check us out. And it has had its drawbacks because the name Lussmann, what is it? Are you a bagel shop? Are you Jewish? Are you German sausages? Do you sell shoes? It's foreign name. I don't like foreign names. And all that sort of stuff. So it takes a while for us to find our feet. Yeah. But again, we're only 20 years old.
Yeah.
In the next 20 years, we can maybe think about changing our approach.
But there's a lot of restaurant groups that have opened and had a strategy of opening rapidly a lot of spaces around the UK and then close them. So to me, that is not necessarily the best strategy. So to me, what you've done and created over the last 20 years is solid.
It's reliable.
Yeah, and you are known in Hertfordshire, and that's what's so wonderful. That's why I love Hertfordshire, because each town, each city it's got its own charm, and it's so each of your restaurants across Hertfordshire has its own personality in a way.
That's right.
And I love that, because it's not like, here's a blueprint, I'm going to put one in every single town across Hertfordshire. You've been integral to that town, and that's what I think is the beauty of it. So as much as you do say you've taken a long time to do it, I don't think you have. I think what you've done is you've actually been passionate about doing it right.
Yes, and then that much of that comes from a passion and authenticity, and a belief in doing the right way, rather than, and there are some groups which are very good at selling something, which happens in retail and everywhere else, but in the end it is a vehicle to make money at all cost. And yes, to be commercially successful, we have to make money. There's nothing more sustainable, in my opinion, than to open a business, to employ staff who then pay taxes and then decide how we're going to run the country or how we're going to improve our environment. That to me is the most sustainable thing possible. But I do think that we could have gone a bit quicker, but we are at least authentic and genuine and learning. And it's nice that we now have customers coming through, which are the children of their parents.
Amazing.
Although I do think Lussmanns sometimes come across as being a little bit older, and I always think we're not an oldies restaurant, but we're not East London vibe. I get that also. Yeah. So, but we have a wonderful, legion is the wrong word, but a community of regulars and patrons and customers who get very upset if something isn't right, because when you go to London, people eat in London, and you invariably eat in more than one place. You drink here, you eat there, you go there, you probably do 2 or 3 places. Number 2, you're with a group of friends. Number 3, you're just overwhelmed by everything that's going on, and therefore the relationship between you and that one restaurant is diluted. But when you come out and you live in a local area, like let's say St Albans, then you're going out to one place. Yeah, and you've got one person taking care of your kids that night. So there's a huge expectation. In addition to that, it's your money. It's sometimes when you're in London or you're with a company, it's not. And number 3, because you live there, your expectation is, because I live here, do not let me down. And therefore, there is so much more expectation heaped onto a local's business rather than when you go to London. So when people say, it must be easier outside London. I think actually no, because most of us live outside London, and therefore we don't want our local restaurants or gems or retailers or shops to let us down. And when our friends and family come to town, we quite often use that restaurant. And we do sometimes make a mistake. We are run by humans. 100%, unlike so many businesses today. And sometimes we make a mistake. And I have lovely customers coming back to me and writing to me and saying, it was a disaster, and I've come back to this town that I used to live in all those years ago, and I've got my friends who didn't know about you, and we've come to your restaurant because it was my favourite. And I'm like, I'm so sorry, but there is so much passion there, and I sometimes forget how much there is, unlike the groups.
Yeah,
which is not a bad thing.
That's a really good point, because I know that like when my husband and I look at places that we've wanted to live, and it's always been like, we really need to make sure that we've got a good local. We want a good place to eat that we can rely on, and a good place to drink.
Yeah.
And where I am in Welling at the moment, like the high street and the restaurant chains around there are constantly evolving. Like nothing there seems to last more than maybe 2-3 years max. So we don't have that in our local area. So yes, actually, St Albans and Lussmanns is actually one of the ones that we do go to, because we know that we can go and get the food that we want to eat. So I never considered that.
Hopefully long may that continue.
Yeah,
but the chains have been fantastic in that they've raised the bar.
Yeah.
And I think of where restaurants were in the 70s and sitting in a pub garden while my parents drank a beer and spending 4 hours in a car or whatever, or in a garden waiting for them to finish, for example.
Yeah.
That's where eating was. Or you went out for your grandmother's 70th birthday to some old hotel with thick flock wallpaper and carpet up to your knees, and you daren't say a word because this is very foreign, this thing. What do we do? You know what I mean? Whereas today everyone eats out, and the chains and they have to be respected to the point whereby they've improved the standard of cuisine. They've raised the bar. They've and there's so much opportunity for for employment and fantastic career employment. In the industry, which it wasn't there in the olden days. Before sort of mid 90s, it started happening with the advent and growth of Pizza Express, for example. They were a trailblazer of their time. Not today, but people would wear a jacket and go for dinner at Pizza Express in very smart towns, and people say, "Well, they never did that." I think, well, no, they did. Because it was a special and unique experience.
And what makes you choose a location?
Well, I'm somewhat lucky because I started off in Hertford, and Hertford being the centre of Hertfordshire, just although it's on the border with Essex, ish, meant that I lived there, and Lussmanns in Hertford was very popular, and then you just get to know the county, and you get to realise actually, as long as every Lussmanns is different, there is an appetite for us to compete and improve on the lackluster, alternative, which quite often are the brands, and we can grow, and therefore, we've taken it from there, and we've always taken on, in all fairness, groups or chain restaurants on the whole that have failed in that place, and nobody has succeeded. So we've always taken secondary sites and restaurants that have not worked, and most of the time they've been chains. Yeah. So therefore we've been up against it, because it was like, well, if the chain can't make it work and it's in a secondary location, it's not going to work. So we've actually made them work, and we've had to work quite hard. Yeah. And therefore I would like to be able to, grow and then maybe now, start considering some slightly, stronger pitches to be able to compete with them on the big groups on an equal basis.
I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this, because it's like asking who your favourite child is, but do you have a favourite of your restaurants?
Well, I can't tell anybody who they're all, because they're all so different. They all have their, and so PC, but they are very charming in their own way. So, certain restaurant will have a better atmosphere, certain restaurant will be better for the summer, certain restaurants better, on a quiet day. It depends really in what mood I'm in. I mean, in all fairness, I work very hard, so I don't often think about what mood I'm in and whether I'm enjoying the moment. And I can never eat in Lussmanns and enjoy the moment, because it's a hugely stressful environment, for me, because, if I eat in someone else's business, whether it's a success or not, it is wonderful to eat somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because it's not my problem.
Yeah.
And whatever goes wrong, it doesn't matter. Because you know what? I'm very easygoing, as long as it's not a total disaster. But if I eat in Lussmanns, I don't want anyone to know who I am. I want to sit in the corner. I have to face the wall. I don't want any. The food has to be exactly as we have agreed. The service, and all of a sudden the staff are on tenterhooks. Everyone's walking around, and the whole thing is just in a very uncomfortable environment for me.
Yeah.
And then my family turn around and say, well, it's great that we get discount at this place. But and the food's
Discount's
lovely.
Not
but
worth it.
It's just not an enjoyable environment. So it's not great. And in fact, a local said to me, I love eating here, and I'm so happy you've created this business called Lussmanns because it's my favourite sort of experience. And he said, I said, I understand what you mean, because that's why I created it. But by creating it, I suddenly realised I can't really enjoy it, which is a really odd thing. Maybe one day, but for the time being, there's, like any business, if you're that much involved with every aspect of it, you know how it should be.
I feel like it's the equivalent of when you cook Christmas dinner. The person that cooks the Christmas dinner never actually eats they pick at it, don't they?
They don't
it's
enjoy
just
it.
I've done all the effort, put it out there, laid it out on the table. I've done all the work, I've saved over it, and it's just like, you enjoy it.
They probably enjoy some drinks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
I'm speaking from experience.
Yeah.
And also they probably think I'm not part of any argument that is raging next door. And you know what? It is tough, Christmas, because I've obviously been there. But I do feel that sometimes it's a lovely space to be, because you are by yourself. You've got the radio on, and and you are just doing it at your own pace, and you can enjoy the moment. But you're right. You come to eat, and you're like, no, I'm stuffed. You haven't eaten much, but you've probably drunk about a bit.
So let's talk about some of the biggest challenges you've faced in growing your business. Where have you found the biggest challenges to be?
Well, in 20 years, there's been lots of challenges, numerous chapters that I've experienced. I'd say COVID was probably the biggest challenge, and I think that was experienced by every single person, without fail. And we had just opened, we'd just taken over the old Coluccio's in Jericho in Oxford, in a wonderful little bohemian corner of Oxford, full of professors and students, and the old red light districts had a great atmosphere, and lots of tourists, and we'd spent, I'd spent 3 months building it with the builder. I mean, I don't do the build, but I'm responsible for the design and project management of it all. And then I will always spend the next 2 months after we open on site with the local manager. So I'm invested for a good 5-6 months in each project. So, and it does mean that I go from doing a strong, heavy 60, 70 hour week to a much more than that for quite a while. And we opened for 2 weeks, and of course COVID came. So that was a huge challenge in one sense, because that word cash flow, because we were empty as a business. We had no debt. We were financially strong before we took over this Coluccio's, and it was, nothing's a dead certain when you open another business, but it was a right pitch, right demographic. We'd got out of the grasp of Hertfordshire. Not that that's bad, but it was like, we have to grow. We have to get away. And this was very much a blue ribbon opportunity for us. And we'd beaten some competition for this old Coluccio's, and everything was set. Everything was set for a fantastic, a future. And of course, with COVID, we had no money. So the challenge there, in simple terms, was with no money and no knowledge of what was going to happen. Not to discuss COVID for a very long time, but we decided to, within 4 days before Boris came on that Sunday night, which was Mothering Sunday, I think, 4 days before, when you saw nurses on TV saying there's no food, and I remember that as was yesterday, there's no food in Tesco's, there's no food in the supermarkets, everyone's taking everything out on that Tuesday, Wednesday. By the Thursday, we'd spoken to Lister, the CEO there. I'd spoken to him and the Trust Hospitals, and said, look, I've got 140 staff, 150 staff, 6 kitchens, I'll start cooking for you. And that it was right. If we can do that, we can take some money,
Yeah.
you know, and we'll do them in biodegradable boxes. They'll be organic produce. They'll be cheaper than what you're selling, and it'll be all for the nurses to, you know, etc. To put in their microwaves, like an organic shepherd's pie, etc.
Wow.
So we had a whole range. And he said, "Great, we can start tomorrow, but I need to pass it to my team." The following day, it was very much a matter of, I haven't heard from him. And I spoke to my partner, and she said, "Well, this is the NHS,
Yeah.
and it might take a while." So in light of that, I said, "Well, we can't wait a while. 24 hours to me, it was like 24 hours too long." In my naivety, I expected a phone call back within the hour. Clearly, it actually took 6 months for something to happen. And it wasn't down to him, you know. There's a lot of layers, a lot of levels, and of course the following day I said, "Right, I can't wait forever." And someone had the idea. It might not even be me. It might be someone else. Said, "Well, for God's sake, why don't you offer it to your customers?"
Yeah.
So within 30 hours, we turned Lussmanns into an online business, and in the end, did about 500,000 meals across the COVID period. But that time was the biggest challenge because with no cash, there was no opportunity of furlough. And before furlough came, we had no idea where we were going. Yeah. But it did present a very unique opportunity whereby it meant that we all just kept the lights on mentally, physically. You know, 30% of the business was still working. So we didn't even think about COVID. It was just a matter of getting on and providing a service, which, of course, like setting fire to a tinder box, it just went mad. Yeah. And I had no idea what was going to happen. And that worked. But that challenge then of, you know, closing a restaurant after spending $500,000, etc., having 6 restaurants, 150 staff, mortgages, and saying, "I've got no money in the bank." And of course, in retrospect, you'd have to say, "Well, you made a mistake there. You should always have some." But, you know, hindsight. Yeah. And no one thought of COVID. So that would have been a big challenge. Brexit and the turning off the tap of European staff, massive challenge because hospitality has always been a mecca. You know, it's always been the crucible of staff have come from Europe. Yeah. You know, whether it's the Portuguese and the Italians in the 50s, and you know, or the first generation of Polish in the 90s, illegal, etc. You know, we've had wonderful swathes of foreign nationals come across and do a fantastic job.
Yeah.
I suppose it has meant that in the long term, we've learned to pay better. Yes. And train, you know, better and reward better. Yeah. And therefore, British staff now, without sounding like I'm a member of the ERG, British staff now have a far more rewarding career in hospitality as a result of Brexit. I don't agree, clearly, because I'm half European, I'm half English, and obviously I run a business. The name's Lussmann. I'm not going to turn around and say, but that was a massive challenge because by turning that tap off, we were competing with staff with fruit pickers, with people in social care, with people which were running, fishmongers. You know, everybody was fighting for the same staff, and there was no staff. Yeah, and that has a massive effect.
Because it was a big hospitality crisis, wasn't there, in terms of like trying to get.
There was no staff. Yeah, and of course, that means all of a sudden that it's a supply and demand. So that mechanism pops up, and all of a sudden people start paying silly money, and all of a sudden your entire business becomes financially broken because which would mean I've got to pay twice or 3 or 4 times as much as I was before. It means we can't carry on running a restaurant at that level. But maybe for some time we've had too many restaurant chairs and tables up and down the land which are poorly performing, don't understand the importance of training, don't have any ethics in relation to how they train and how they develop and how they look after their staff. So there has been a cull. You know, we know of Prezzo removing another 46 restaurants last week or this week. And that's the third time or second time they've gone through this process. And they're not the only company. Colucci's before them and Jamie's Italian, and there's a whole list of them. So I hope we're not one that has to struggle and suffer in that way. But we have probably got too many restaurants. Okay. And maybe, the time's come for us to just make sure that what we do have is just slightly better.
Because that's literally beautifully leading on to my next question, what does the future look like for you as a business? You know, what do you see in terms of the industry itself, hospitality, but also Lussmanns itself?
I don't know. I've always believed passionately that if you do what you do well and you keep on evolving and listening and pivoting and adjusting, albeit the customers don't see too much of that because they like to know that it's consistent with what they're expecting, then you have every reason to stay in business. And we are very small in contrast to our competitors that we compete with, like the Ivy Group. So a bit like an oil tanker and a tug, and we're the little tug. We can move swiftly, like a London cab. We can reverse and turn around very fast if it's not working. So I think for as long as you've got people which are passionate about giving great service, understand the mechanics of being consistent, accessible, and making sure the staff are always charming, which essentially is a massive part of hospitality, more than in Europe. In France, it's the opposite. It's food first and staff second. I think you've got a very good chance to stay in business. I think, like midwives and like undertakers, hospitality, I think, is an integral part, like the pub, of what we do. So I'm not concerned that there's going to be a culling to the point whereby we don't have many restaurants. I hope that I'm smart enough and the staff around me, which are always improving, will become, very much the architects of tomorrow's business and be able to, push me to one side and say, right, Andrei, we need to change it up. In terms of Lussmanns, we will carry on growing. I mean, we are working on a couple of projects as we speak. I can't tell you that. I mean, I can't tell you what they are or who they are, but we are fiercely passionate about growing, because the funny thing about growing is that you if you know what you're doing, you can essentially become commercially stronger. The economies of scale start to make sense, and then you start to do the stuff that you're good at. The problem being, with 5 restaurants, we're a business that has a head office function, but we're too small to really afford it, but we're too big not to have one. So the future is we've got to grow the business, and then I will find that I can do the stuff that I like more of. And that's one thing I've learned in business after 30 years of business, is that you spend so much time trying to highlight and illustrate and the competencies of staff and what they're good at, what they're not good at, how we need to train them and develop them. And one thing I've learned is, actually, let's not forget that if they're good at something, get them to do more of it.
Yeah.
If they're not very good at that, they might well never be very good at it. So why are we driving them mad, and why are we driving ourselves mad? So there are obviously key competencies that we need to be consistent with. But that's one thing I've learned over the years, is that we just need to make sure that people who love what they're doing within the business do more of it.
And speaking of doing more of what you love, do your future plans involve you learning to fly that plane?
No, they don't. I have other ideas. I mean, no chance. No. I mean, there are lots of fields, in Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire. Lots of little airstrips. I often drive past them and think, because obviously after the war, there's huge amounts of aircrafts were taken up into the skies from this area. But no, that's a very rich and expensive part-time sort of hobby. I've got other things I want to do, but I do like being in a plane. I mean,
as long as you're not flying it. And
the nearer the front, if I could ever be in the front of the plane rather than the back, that's always an advantage, because we all of us like to enjoy the expensive side of flying.
Definitely. Always want to turn left. Don't want to turn right. Yes. Don't want to be in chicken class.
Yes.
Chicken class?
Hell yeah. That's what it's
chicken
called.
Class?
So my mum was a BA cabin crew, so I know all the code. It's chicken class.
It's chicken class, right.
Economy. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. What I want to know is, do you still have the chef clogs?
No.
Oh, they didn't make it.
No. I mean, I should have framed them. You're right. I never thought that I'd carry on with Lussmanns. I mean, in retrospect, I would, if I had kept them in some box somewhere, I mean, they probably would have gone green or black. But you're right. They'd been nice to have nailed them to some frame and say, given to me, when I was such and such. No, it was a nice touch. Yeah, it didn't
definitely
do it in the end. I mean, I think, by today's standards, that doesn't do it, I'm afraid. You've got to work a bit harder than give someone your shoes. Well, I mean, if you're a favourite celebrity like, Jennifer Lopez, probably you've got no problem.
You're very happy to keep them.
But the chef was most definitely not Jennifer Lopez. He was far from it.
A question we like to ask all of our guests is, if someone invested, and for you, I'm going to say £100,000 in your business, in your bank account right now, what would you do with it?
Cool.
Just thinking about that plane again, aren't you?
What would I do with it? I've got no idea. I suppose what I would do with it, I would extend Harpenden into the garden, not totally, and improve or increase our covers there by 60% because it's a very small restaurant. And we're oversubscribed quite often. So very boring business decision, but I think I would do that because it would return a good yield. And the staff would be happy because it would have a nice refurbishment. Staff always love, because they always get very upset when they think, oh, you've forgotten us when you open a new restaurant. It's like, no, it's you can't constantly be refurbishing restaurants as it's expensive. So there we are. I think that I would do that.
So let's move on to our 3 lightning questions then.
Go for it.
What is your best business accomplishment? What are you most proud of?
Making sustainability affordable.
I love that answer. I love that answer. What is your favourite productivity hack?
Right, that's a very modern term. I can just about work out productivity. Hack, yes, a productivity hack. I'll come back to this. See, it's not very good. I should come back. I'll think about that. I'll come back to productivity.
Okay, come back to that one. And finally, what's one thing that the internet doesn't know about you yet?
I don't think it knows very much at all because I'm one of these I'm one of these rare people that actually, as I said to you before we started, I think people's private lives is rather boring, and I'm I am hugely excited by my own private life, and I have one. I mean, and there are not many kids. There are, I have children, etc. And I'm very, very passionate I'm very passionate about my private life, but I'd say the internet probably knows nothing. There was one statement, I think, because of course we all search these things up. Years, you
Googled yourself
some evening, when you're a bit bored, which I don't have many evenings like that. I think there's one thing I said that was written somewhere. And I'm like, okay, so there's lots of stuff, and I quite like it. Not that it's anything to know, but it's nice to know that there's lots of people out there that actually don't need to put everything out there.
Absolutely.
Without sounding, just I think sometimes we know too much. And it's like fine. It's like an actor or someone you like, and you really like, and then you find that they're a bit different to what you thought, or you meet them, and you think, oh no, So when we had the coffee shop in Kensington, we had a few relationship with a few famous people, and some were really positive, like when we cooked for Mr. David Bowie, although we didn't meet him. That was very special. Not that he was in the, we had to deliver the food to BBC White City. So, but we still cooked for him when we had the Jonathan Ross show all those years back. And he said, I'm not eating this BBC food. So I was called up and said, you need to sort it out. And I was walking out the door and I said, well, Christ, I am going home. And they said, well, it's for David Bowie. And I was like, in that case, I'm not going. But there have been lots of others that we've come across who just think, God, I wish I hadn't met you. You're not quite as nice as what I thought.
Oh yeah, it can be a real struggle. I've met a few people that have been like high on my list of, oh my God, I can't believe I meet you. And then bless him, didn't quite. But sometimes I think also you can build it up in your head of how amazing they're going to be, and then even if they are the loveliest person, it's like such an anticlimax because
it is a very human thing. We do it with films when everyone says you go and see that film. And then finally you go and see and think, well, what's the big issue? Well, if no one has said anything to you, you'd have thought that's a great film.
Yes.
And it's the same with restaurants. I've had a number of people say to me, your restaurants, I mean, it was I enjoyed it very much, it was very good, but it wasn't, it was quite normal. And I was like, well, what do you expect? Sort of trapeze elephants and whatnot. And it's because in this particular restaurant, it took 6 months for people to get the table they wanted, which had to be 8 o'clock on Saturday night. I'm like, well, it does get booked up, and that's life. And because they had to spend, a number of people 6 months or 9 months, and they weren't going to come any earlier, and finally when they came, after all their friends and everyone had said it was really good, their expectation was so high that we let them down. And I said, look, yes, you probably can cook if you can cook as well at home. That's not a bad thing. Because we are meant to be the kitchen away from home. For those who can't be bothered to cook tonight, those who can cook. So, expectation is something that rages. Every time something's good, everyone hears about it. And then people turn around and say, well, not what I was expecting.
Yeah.
But, you know, we're more about being the locals restaurant. So, you know, there's always that honeymoon where you get a club of a tribe of those that want to be the first, but then you get beyond that, and then you settle into a groove, and you consistently look after the regulars, and then, you know, new regulars. You know, you don't, you know, because they move away, or some might die, or, you know, unfortunately you need to keep the numbers going up.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'm just trying to think of your hack. What was it again? Productivity hack. Give me an example of a productivity hack that someone would have given you.
I suppose for me, my one is I'm all about lists, so that I can make sure that no balls are dropped, because I'm very conscious of
okay, fair enough. So I'll give you a very quick one. Google Calendar.
Yeah.
So I put everything on there, even when I'm going out socially. Everything is on there, and nothing's hidden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is wonderful, because it means that my entire life, because I used to always use a little, you know, book or something, and I'd never write things down. Whereas now everything's in there.
Yeah.
So there it is.
I'm the same with mine. In fact, I don't know if I've ever shown you mine. Mine's colour coded, so I know whether it's work life,
of course it is,
retouching, personal, note to. I even have one that's like green that just says notes to self. Everything goes in there. It's a rainbow. It's a rainbow of joy.
Yeah, that's very impressive.
Connor, what is your productivity hack?
For me, probably Spotify playlists.
Oh, yes.
Spotify playlist. There's one called Flow State, and then just any lo-fi beats. It just helps me concentrate if I'm like writing a script or writing a pitch or an email to somebody. It gets me in that flow state.
I knew yours was going to be techie as well. Yeah. I'm the old school one with the notepad and pen. So,
is yours notepad and pen?
Yeah, I'm all about. I think because I'm a PR, and because for me, when I write a press release, if I'm editing anything, I'm still about the pen. I'm still very much about. That is my process. It's just something that I do it on computer, don't get me wrong. I'm not that old school that I don't use computer. But I think like physically writing and editing, I suppose it's like writing your own book. It's the same process. How
is your spelling?
Terrible.
Because I find that since I've got older and I'm writing less, my spelling is so bad.
Yeah.
And I always know that when I've come up, often people say, well, who does all your complaints? I mean, we don't have many. I'm happy to say that statistically 98% of people who do Lussmanns gives us a thumbs up.
That's
but
good.
I deal with all online stuff.
That's
every
good.
One of them between sort of 7:15 in the morning till 7:45 is every morning of the week I do that. And thankfully, if it was the opposite way around, I'd probably want to just give up. So 98% is good, so therefore it's always okay. But two people have asked me the last couple of weeks, you know, how do we know it's you? And I said, well, there's always a spelling mistake. It's terrible. After all that schooling and education, I just think, God, it's got worse. And because when you do, you know, if you were writing as you still are, then invariably you would remember. But because you're doing it on a computer,
so reliant on the computer, that's the problem.
Yeah, and it is not. And not all platforms spell check it, or if they do, it's American or something, and you're doing it so fast and you move on. So yes.
Well, it's like when I was a waitress. I have to say, I did try to not use a pad so that I used my memory, so I kept my brain active. That was always my one thing of like actually going to the table and not. You know,
so you're one of those, are you?
Oh God, is that bad?
Well, how many? So did you? What was your productivity? 100%.
I was a very good waitress.
So you remembered everything? So not like
I think I'd worked there for so long though. At that point, like I'd worked there from the age of 14, so I knew the menu off by heart. So I suppose that was probably something. But
was it a bit different? Like now, I mean, I say this as someone like. We have a lot of allergies in my household, so we are those people that, you know, we need the chili removed, like the gluten-free. But I guess then
not back
it wasn't.
Then. Not back then. No, not at all. Because it literally was. It was a silver service restaurant. It was a la carte. It was, you know, whether everything was served, your vegetables to the plate. It was just you got what you were given, and that was it. Like there was none of the allergy stuff, I have to say, back then.
Yeah.
I feel like I sound like I'm really old now I'm saying it the way I am, but yeah.
Things have shifted a lot in the last 2 years.
Yeah,
2 years.
Yeah, allergens is a big part of
it is now. And it's important, I get that, definitely. So, but I mean, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. To leave our listeners on a last note, for anyone that's inspired by the hospitality industry or thinking about getting into it or even setting up their own bar, restaurant, what would you like to give as your last bit of advice for anyone inspired by our chat today?
I don't know if it's just one thing. I think it'll be a little collection of, a few little things, which are all. I think you need to know your business. Know the industry. Wanting to have a bar because you like, watching Cocktail with poor what's his name, Tom Cruise, isn't good enough. Although I don't know, you've got to have more. So know the industry. Number one, in no particular order. Two, know the numbers. Understand the power of cash flow, because so many people, and I've been one of them, have been tripped up. And if you haven't got cash, you're gone. Yeah. However much profit you think you're making, if you haven't got cash in the bank, it's all over. Number two. And number three, graft.
Yeah.
I'm afraid to say, as we said earlier, unless you're very, 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 very wealthy, or a wonderful, brilliant inventor, is graft.
Yeah.
And that will never change. And I think it's going to be. And number three, number four, I suppose, would be resolve. Get up, dust yourself down, make the mistakes, learn from them, and go again, and keep going. And then I suppose those are the four things: resolve, graft, know the industry, and cash flow. Yeah. And I suppose passion. There we are, 5.
Brilliant.
Without passion, you're no one.
Absolutely. So where can people find you if they are...
What, me personally?
We know we do know that if they want a response to an email, it's you at the end.
No, they do get that. Yes, no, they do. No, I am around the restaurants. I do speak to people. I just, I've learned the hard way, because in the old days I would go into restaurants and I would shout at staff and managers and talk to customers, and I realised that that's not how you run a business. You've got to empower the manager and the staff to feel as though it's their business as well. So, there's a website, lussmanns.com. There's various spellings, but you'll find it in the end, because there aren't many Lussmanns in this country. In fact, there are none. And we have restaurants across the county, so we're a strong regional player.
Where, just remind us where those restaurants are.
So we are in Hertford, where it all began after leaving London. St Albans, which we've been there for now in St Albans for almost 20 years already. Hitchin, Harpenden, and Berkhamsted. There's that 5, yes. Yeah. And we are growing, but I don't think it'll be in Hertfordshire now, because we've got to get out of the county. Because if we upset... Can you imagine if we upset someone very, very useful in Hertfordshire? We're gone. You know what I mean? It's like it's all over. So we sort of need to have a relationship with someone else.
Yeah, I hear you.
Amazing.
Well, I'm excited to hear more. So please do stay in touch with us. I just want to say thank you. It's been absolutely wonderful. I've really enjoyed getting to know more about you. As an individual, and as well as about your business as well. So I hope that everyone else has found this as useful as we have. So thank you very much for your time.
That's very kind. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm used to usually being the person who has to interview others. So it was nice that I didn't have to worry about that. And I was the person who's been asked a question. So thank you for learning about Lussmanns. And hopefully some of your readers or listeners... or watchers. I have no idea what this is. Watchers as well.
Watching as well. Did you not know you were recording?
I didn't know why there was a camera there. See, I always think a podcast is just like, it's just, something to listen to in the car. So
eyes and ears.
I see, right, okay. Well, I'd have made more of an effort, so I mean, I don't,
You look fabulous.
Anyway, I hope that if nothing else, it'll secure at least a couple more diners to come and try us out. Definitely. And we have a wonderful set menu, which is called a local set menu. Although we did have a customer come in the other day and said, "Is it only for locals?" I said, No, it's just called locals because it's sort of, it's a nice way of terming. Because I live in Marlow, I'm like, it's all right, don't worry, we're all right. I couldn't believe it. I thought, it's just a phrase. But anyway, you can enjoy this wonderful local set menu, and we do it, unlike our competitors, 7 days a week until 6:30 p.m. every day, and it's 2 or 3 courses for I think 19 and 23. But it's wonderful, proper food, and we change it every 3 months. So
they don't need a proof of address to secure a local menu.
Age. No, I was amazed. I was lovely in a way, but I thought no, it's locals. It's a regular. And you can become one if you want.
Well, that could be our next business lunch.
I think so, definitely, for sure.
So thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Problem.
Thank you.
Okay.